She slipped the letter back into her pocket, started the engine, and pulled onto the road. Sometimes kindness wasn't about grand gestures. Sometimes it was just a meal, a conversation, a moment. But those moments could change everything. Life has a way of bringing people back to the places they were meant to be. If you've been holding on to something, an apology, a message, a second chance, don't wait forever. Some stories are still waiting to be written. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real, powerful stories like this one. She swung again, a sharp, brutal crack, and the mailbox wobbled on its post. Another hit, and the door snapped off completely, landing in the grass. She exhaled, almost satisfied, then took one last swing before lowering the bat and walking casually back toward her house like she had just taken out the trash. Darius sat frozen, gripping his phone so tightly his fingers hurt. He felt a sharp, burning anger rise in his chest, but just as quickly he forced himself to breathe, think. Reacting out of anger wouldn't help. He needed to be smart about this. The next morning, he didn't say anything. He waited. Sure enough, around noon, Karen came strolling down her driveway to check her mail. She didn't even glance at him, but Darius knew she was expecting a reaction. She wanted him to explode. She wanted him to march over, yell, cause a scene, something that would let her paint him as the aggressive neighbor. Instead, he gave her nothing. She reached into her mailbox, pulled out a few envelopes, and turned to head back inside. That's when Darius spoke. His voice calm but sharp enough to cut through the tension. "Got some good swings in last night, huh?" Karen froze mid-step for a split second. She didn't move. Then she turned slowly, forcing a fake laugh. "Excuse me?" Darius held up his phone, tapped the screen, and turned it toward her. The footage played in perfect clarity. Her, the bat, the destruction, the casual walk home. Karen's expression changed fast. Her fake smile twitched, and for the first time since he moved in, she actually looked rattled. But she recovered quickly, straightening her shoulders and tilting her chin up. "That's not me," she said flatly. Darius let out a low, disbelieving chuckle. "You sure? Because it looks a lot like you." Karen's nostrils flared. "You're harassing me." "You're destroying my property," Darius shot back, his patience thinning. "And you've been doing it for months." She crossed her arms, lips pressing into a tight line. "Prove it." Darius didn't blink. Already, the words were sinking in. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. She wasn't used to being cornered. She liked control, but she didn't have any now. She turned abruptly and stormed back into her house, slamming the door behind her. Darius exhaled slowly, watching her retreat. He had the footage, he had the proof. But something told him this wasn't over. He just didn't realize how much worse it was about to get. The first sign of escalation came the very next morning. Darius walked outside to find a pile of garbage, actual stinking trash, dumped at the base of his freshly replaced mailbox. At first, he thought maybe an animal had gotten into someone's bin, but no. The way the bags were ripped open, the contents carefully scattered in his yard, but nowhere else. It was deliberate. Darius looked up, glancing toward Karen's house. Her curtains shifted just slightly, but he saw it. She was watching. All right, so that's how she wanted to play, he thought. He took a deep breath, turned around, and grabbed a pair of gloves. He didn't yell, didn't react, just calmly picked up every piece of trash and threw it away. He wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing him lose his temper. But that was just the beginning. That night, while he was sitting on his porch enjoying the rare bit of cool air, he heard a loud screeching sound. His head snapped toward the street just in time to see a white SUV peeling away, and his mailbox once again knocked to the ground. Darius's grip tightened around the armrest of his chair. Now she was using her car. He could feel the heat rising in his chest, that old familiar anger clawing its way up. But he forced himself to stay still, to breathe. She wanted him to react, so he didn't. Instead, he went inside, pulled up the security footage, and saved everything: the garbage, the SUV, the repeated destruction. He labeled each file, dated them, and made sure Karen's face was clearly visible in the earlier videos. Then he made a decision. If she wanted to play dirty, fine. But she was about to find out that he wasn't an easy target. The next morning, Darius drove straight to a metal workshop on the other side of town. He spent nearly an hour talking to the owner, explaining exactly what he needed. By the end of the conversation, he had ordered something that would make sure Karen never touched his mailbox again. A reinforced steel mailbox. Not just any mailbox either. This one was designed to withstand anything. The kind you see in rural areas where teenagers try and fail to knock them over. It was thick, heavy, and secured into the ground with concrete. But that wasn't all. Darius had one more request: a low-voltage deterrent. Not dangerous, nothing that could truly hurt someone, but strong enough to give a nasty shock to anyone dumb enough to swing at it. The guy at the shop had laughed when Darius explained what was happening. "Man, that's some next-level pettiness," he said, shaking his head. "But I like it. She won't see it coming." Darius smirked. That's the point. 2 days later, the mailbox was installed. It stood taller and stronger than the previous ones, embedded in the concrete like a monument that would never move again. Darius took a step back, admiring his work. Let's see what she tries now. And he wouldn't have to wait long. That same night, around 11:45 p.m., his phone buzzed with a motion alert from his security camera. He was already awake, half expecting it. Something told him Karen wasn't going to let this go. He tapped the notification, and the live feed loaded. There she was, Karen Ledford, standing in front of his brand-new steel-reinforced mailbox, bat in hand. Darius almost laughed. She didn't even hesitate. The second she stepped onto the curb, she raised the bat, her stance wide, her grip tight. She was going to destroy it again, except this time she had no idea what was coming. Darius leaned forward, watching closely. The first swing connected hard. He saw the force ripple through her arms as the bat struck the steel, but instead of denting or bending like before, it barely made a sound. The shock on Karen's face was immediate. She adjusted her grip and swung again. Crack! The impact jolted up her arms, but the mailbox didn't budge, not an inch. Karen stepped back, breathing heavily, clearly frustrated. Darius smirked. "Oh, you're mad now." He kept watching. He knew she wasn't done. He could see it in the way she squared her shoulders, how she refused to accept defeat. She took a final step forward, gripping the bat like it was a weapon, and then she swung with everything she had. The moment the bat connected, a sharp, bright spark flashed where the metal met metal, and then Karen screamed. Her entire body jerked backward as the low-voltage shock hit her. The bat flew from her hands, clattering onto the pavement. She stumbled, arms flailing, and landed hard on the ground. For a second, she just sat there, breathing fast, her hands shaking. She looked stunned, disoriented, like she couldn't figure out what had just happened. Then, rage. Karen scrambled to her feet, stumbling a little, and turned toward the mailbox like it had personally insulted her. Her fists clenched, her face twisted in fury. Darius could barely hold in his laughter. Now she was really mad. She opened her mouth, probably to curse or scream or let out whatever nonsense was brewing in her head. But then she saw it, the red, blinking light on the security camera. Her entire body went still. Darius could see it. The exact moment she realized what this meant, that her attack had been recorded, that there was proof. For the first time, she looked afraid. She spun around quickly, looking toward the street, probably hoping no one else had seen her, and then, without another word, she turned and ran. Darius watched her disappear into her house, slamming the door behind her. He sat back, exhaling slowly, and then he laughed. A deep, satisfied laugh that rumbled in his chest. Checkmate, but he wasn't done yet. He reached for his phone, replaying the footage, every single second of it. The attack, the shock, the fall, the sheer panic in her eyes. Then he hit save. Karen had spent months trying to tear him down, trying to break him, to intimidate him, to push him out. But tonight, she finally got what she deserved. And in the morning, the entire neighborhood was going to know about it. Morning came, and Darius knew before he even stepped outside that the whole street was buzzing. He could hear it through his window, neighbors chatting in hushed voices, the occasional laugh, the unmistakable tension of something big having happened. By the time he walked out his front door, a small group had already gathered near his mailbox. A few of them were staring at the damage, or rather the lack of it. "Damn, thing looks brand new," Mr. Hargrove, an older man from 2 houses down, muttered, scratching his head. "Didn't even dent." Darius smirked. "Wasn't supposed to." He barely finished his sentence when he spotted Karen. She was standing in her yard, arms crossed, face pale. She wasn't looking at him, wasn't looking at anyone. Instead, she was staring at the sidewalk like she wanted to sink into it. Darius almost felt bad for her. Almost. Then his phone buzzed, a text from his neighbor Camille. "Oh my God! Did you see next door?" Darius raised an eyebrow, tapped the app open, and there it was. Someone had uploaded the footage. Not him, someone else. His finger hovered over the play button, but he didn't even need to press it. The comments told him everything he needed to know. "She's been doing this for months. I can't stop watching her hit the ground. So, she's been harassing him this whole time, and then tried to act like she was the victim. Unreal. This is embarrassing, honestly. The HOA needs to do something about her." Karen's dirty laundry was completely aired out, and she knew it. Darius glanced back toward her yard, just in time to see her storm back into her house, slamming the door. A few people chuckled. "Guess she didn't expect to go viral," someone muttered. But the moment of amusement didn't last long. A few minutes later, police showed up. A patrol car rolled onto the street, stopping right in front of Karen's driveway. 2 officers stepped out, one of them holding a clipboard. They didn't even need to knock. Karen must have been watching because she opened the door before they even got to the porch. Darius couldn't hear the conversation, but he didn't have to. The body language said it all. Karen's arms were waving. The officers were calm but firm. Then one of them pointed toward his house, toward his mailbox, and then her face crumpled. Darius knew what was happening. They were telling her what she already knew: the destruction of property, the repeated harassment, the fact that she was caught on camera. She was in real trouble now. And for the first time in months, Darius finally felt at peace. But before he turned to go back inside, he noticed something. A woman, one of the newer neighbors, someone he hadn't spoken to much, was staring at him. not in a bad way, more like regretful. Then, after a moment, she walked over. "Hey," she said quietly. "I just wanted to say, I had no idea she was doing all that." Darius nodded, not sure where she was going with it. She sighed. "I should have said something earlier. I noticed the mail thing and the trash, but I didn't want to get involved." He looked at her for a long moment, then shrugged. "You see it now." She swallowed. "Yeah, I do." Darius let that hang in the air for a second. Then, before she could say anything else, he simply said, "Better late than never." And he meant it. Because today, Karen wasn't just exposed, she was finally being held accountable. And that was justice enough. Karen Ledford's fall from grace was faster than anyone expected. By the end of the week, she was the talk of the neighborhood. It wasn't just the security footage, though that certainly didn't help. It was the police report, the HOA complaints, the realization that she had been harassing Darius for months. People who once waved at her now avoided eye contact. A few even crossed the street when they saw her coming. And Karen, she had never looked more miserable. She barely left the house. When she did, it was quick and careful. No more smug glances, no more passive-aggressive remarks. Just a woman who knew she had lost. Darius didn't go out of his way to rub it in. He didn't have to. The neighborhood had already done that for him. But there was one last moment of reckoning. It happened late one afternoon, just as the sun was dipping behind the rooftops. Darius was out watering his lawn when he heard footsteps approaching. He turned, and there she was, Karen. She looked different, not angry, not smug, just defeated. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, in a voice so low he almost didn't hear it, she muttered, "I didn't mean for it to get this bad." Darius just stared at her. She shifted on her feet. She stopped, exhaling sharply. "I was just—" She couldn't finish because she knew there was no excuse, no justification, no version of this where she wasn't the problem. Darius let the silence drag for a moment before finally speaking. "Yeah, you did." Karen swallowed hard. "Well, She waved vaguely, like she was going to say more, but she didn't. She just turned and walked away. That was the last real conversation they ever had. A few weeks later, the house went up for sale. Darius didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. He just watched from his porch as Karen Ledford packed up her life and drove away. And when the moving truck finally disappeared down the street, he let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Not because he won, but because he finally got his peace back. Some people think they can get away with anything, that their actions have no consequences, that they can bully, destroy, and manipulate without ever facing the fallout. But sooner or later, the truth catches up. Karen thought she was untouchable. She wasn't. And when karma finally came knocking, she had no choice but to answer. Let this be a reminder. Hatred, harassment, and cruelty always have a price. And when the bill comes due, it's never pretty. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. And remember, what you put into the world always comes back to you.